Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. My mom wants us to split if you can't give her a grandchild. Alright, sure. But I'm pregnant though. Alright. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alara, a housewife in my 30s. I live with my husband, who works as a salaried employee. We met when I was working at a food-related company. I was drawn to him because of his occasional charming smile during our many business discussions, so I took the initiative and asked him out. At first he declined, saying, "Sorry, I'm flattered, but I have a girlfriend." However, a month later, he approached me and said, "I broke up with her. Can we start dating?" It turns out that after my confession, he started to see me differently. His girlfriend noticed the change in his behavior and asked, "Are you interested in someone else?" When he nodded, she suggested they break up, and he agreed. I felt guilty for ruining their relationship, but he reassured me with a smile, saying it wouldn't have lasted anyway. Don't worry. His words comforted me, and after dating for 3 years, we got married. At that time, he told me, "I want to have children after we get married. Could you be a housewife to support me and our future children?" I was working at an exploitative company and didn't want to continue there, so I agreed. I quit my job and became a stay-at-home wife, deciding to support my husband. The transition from working to becoming a full-time housewife was surprisingly difficult and confusing, but I didn't mind because our newlywed life was smooth sailing, and I was at the peak of happiness. Every day was fun and filled with joy, and not having any in-law issues was a big deal for me. My husband's parents lived just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. When I first found out my in-laws lived nearby, I worried they might visit frequently and make things difficult. However, my fears were unfounded. My in-laws were incredibly kind, often coming over to patiently and kindly teach me various things. They never complained about our struggle to conceive and even told me, "I love you more than any grandchild. I've always wanted a daughter. Since our family is mostly men, please let me love you like a real daughter." I adored my mother-in-law for that, and I trusted my father-in-law, who was a man of few words but very reliable. However, this warm treatment only lasted for the first few years. Over time, my in-laws' attitudes changed. My father-in-law became even quieter, and my mother-in-law's demeanor shifted so drastically that I wondered if she had a split personality, or perhaps this was her true nature all along. To give you an idea of the change, it felt like she went from +100 to -100. My once loving mother-in-law had become rather tough on me. Because we lived nearby, my mother-in-law frequently popped by our house, and when my husband wasn't around, she would nag me incessantly. She pressured me to have a child soon, saying, "I want to see my grandchild already, and that's your duty." As a wife, not too long ago, she had told me that children are gifts from heaven, and that they come naturally when the time is right, so there's no need to rush. Moreover, she began comparing us to other families, saying things like, "I heard the family next door just had a baby, and the lady next door is pregnant too." This added even more pressure on me. However, no matter how much my mother-in-law pushed, it didn't matter if my husband wasn't on board. At the beginning of our marriage, my husband did say he wanted kids, but about a year after we got married, he seemed to lose interest altogether. Even when I tried to initiate intimacy, he would turn me away. saying, "I'm tired, let's do it some other day," or "You're bothering me, I'm trying to play my game." When I explained this to my mother-in-law, she didn't seem to understand or empathize, and she continued to pressure me about having a child, causing my stress level to build up day by day. Feeling overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's constant nagging, I confided in my husband about how hard it was being pressured to have kids. Begrudgingly. He said, "I don't see the need to rush, but I agree to make more effort to have a child together." So we both tried. But no matter how long we waited, I never became pregnant. During this time, my mother-in-law continued to accuse me of not putting in enough effort, sparing my husband from any blame. I started to suspect that the stress from her constant pressure was affecting my ability to conceive. Unable to withstand it anymore, my husband and I decided to seek fertility treatments. Just when I thought I could finally breathe a sigh of relief, a new problem concerning my husband arose. Ever since we started fertility treatment, my husband has been acting cold towards me. He comes home from work and immediately retreats into his room to play video games, often ignoring me when I try to talk to him. That alone would have been bearable, but things took a turn for the worse when he started getting angry at me for spending a little money on sewing materials, my hobby. On stressful days, he'd take out his frustration on me. Whenever I tried to argue back, he'd quickly lose his temper and lash out, repeatedly saying, "Who do you think is providing for you? You're just a freeloader," and continue to behave selfishly. When I remind him that I only quit my job because he wanted me to, he doesn't seem to listen. One day, amidst all the ongoing chaos, my husband, who should have been off to work, was at home playing video games. When I asked, "Aren't you going to work?" he responded, "I quit." Apparently, he had quit his job without even discussing it with me. Shocked, I asked him why, and he snapped, "Get out of my business," and got angry, frustrated by his uncooperative attitude. I had no choice but to accept the situation. I wasn't panicking about our finances, as I thought we could manage with unemployment benefits and our savings. However, it became stressful when I noticed that my husband showed no interest in finding another job. With his job gone, he started staying home all day. I wish he would go out more, but his hobby was gaming. Aside from the occasional trip to the nearby convenience store for cigarettes, he spent all day at home playing video games. Compared to when he was employed, the time we spent together increased dramatically. If this had been back when we first started dating, I might have seen it as a good thing, having more time for intimacy, but not anymore. Spending more time with my husband, who, like my mother-in-law, had gone from being a +100 to a -100, only led to more marital disputes. Gradually, we realized that even just talking to each other was becoming stressful, leading to less and less conversation. I began to wonder, what's the point of continuing this marriage? I started feeling the limits of our current lifestyle and began thinking about ways to break free from it. One day, fed up with my husband wasting his time gaming at home, I finally lost my patience and snapped, "You're not a child. Stop playing games all the time. Find a job already." In response, my husband said, "Speaking of which, my mom told me to divorce you if you can't give her a grandchild." At that moment, I felt an unexpected gratitude towards my mother-in-law. Who would have thought she'd inadvertently assist me in this way? Ironically, I had discovered I was pregnant earlier that day and had planned to share the news that night. But now, perhaps it was best to keep that to myself. allowing me some distance from both my mother-in-law and my husband. I calmly replied, "All right, understood. Here are the divorce papers." I retrieved the already filled-out documents from my drawer and handed them to him and my husband, clearly unprepared for my swift agreement to divorce, let alone for me to produce ready divorce papers, froze in surprise at the sight. His usual air of condescension vanished. He was completely taken aback, though he seemed to struggle to say something. He felt compelled to follow his mother's advice and sign the papers without much hesitation. Throughout this process, he kept stealing glances at me, trying to gauge my reaction after finalizing the divorce papers. We agreed to meet later to discuss matters like asset division. However, in truth, we had very little to divide. My husband, known for his spending on hobbies, had poured considerable money into gaming arcades, despite criticizing my spending habits. Saving money was a foreign concept to him. My husband, who hadn't saved a penny since his bachelor days, continued this habit after we got married. As a result, we hadn't accumulated any savings or assets during our marriage. When it came time to discuss dividing our belongings, I thought our conversations were straightforward. However, my husband insisted there was more to discuss and pointed to a specific bank book, saying, "We still have our savings, right?" Indeed, that account held a significant amount, and he proposed dividing it. Yet that savings account wasn't subject to property division. "This money I saved before we got married, so it doesn't count in the property division," I explained. My husband's face drained of color upon hearing this, but he quickly recovered and suggested, "But surely this condo should be considered for division. I lived here too." With a firm and somewhat cold smile, I clarified the reality. "Unfortunately, the condo is solely under my name, so legally, you have no claim to it. Moreover, I've already listed it for sale, so it's best for you to find new accommodations promptly to avoid any complications." I informed him I had diligently saved for years with the goal of upgrading to a larger home, anticipating that the condo would eventually feel cramped. Even as a working professional, I had managed to amass substantial savings and purchased the condo during my single years, establishing a financial foundation of my own. The proceeds from selling the condo would enable me to build a new home downtown. Naturally, these assets were acquired before our marriage and were not subject to division. Though my husband may have assumed otherwise, he was mistaken in his expectations. Upon learning that he wouldn't have a claim in the property division, my husband was visibly stunned. Despite our attempts to continue the conversation, he remained in a daze, with nothing more to discuss. Our dialogue quickly came to an end. We proceeded to file the divorce papers, and our separation was finalized without complications. A few months later, I relocated to my parents' home, where I received their unwavering support during the safe delivery of a healthy baby boy. I named him Kieran, a name that signifies strength and ambition. Now, I spend each day cherishing moments with my beloved child and supportive parents. Naturally, I haven't informed my ex-husband. Should he discover the news, I can only imagine my former mother-in-law storming in, demanding, "Where's my grandchild?" After being evicted from the condo, my ex-husband returned to his parents' home, but the speed of our divorce left him reeling. He became increasingly withdrawn, rarely leaving the house, and his appearance became so unkempt that he drew attention from the police when he did venture out. It was a pitiful sight. Later, I learned he had quit his job due to strained relationships at work, where his rude behavior and poor treatment of female colleagues had isolated him completely. Unable to tolerate the situation, he'd abruptly resigned. Perhaps his true nature had always been hidden. He had only shown kindness to me, a wolf in sheep's clothing. 3 years later, I found myself managing a craft store. My regular visits to a local craft store caught the attention of the owner, who approached me one day. "I'm considering retirement. Would you be interested in taking over?" "Elara?" she asked, with my parents providing strong support with childcare. I had ample free time and was considering re-entering the workforce. Declining would mean the store's closure, inconveniencing many loyal customers. So, after careful consideration, I decided to take on the responsibility of running the store today. While serving my occasional regular customers, I was surprised by unexpected visitors, my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. "This shop suits you quite well, doesn't it?" they commented casually. "Sure, Mom. Look, this fabric would look great on you," my ex-husband added, attempting to be congenial. Annoyed by their transparent flattery, I cut to the chase and asked, "So what brings you here?" That's when my former mother-in-law blurted out something nonsensical. "Give me my grandchild back." Apparently, she had somehow learned about my child and had intentions of making him the heir to their family home. "You were already pregnant when I brought up divorce. Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have agreed to divorce," accused my ex-husband. "I wanted the divorce. Obviously, if you had known I was pregnant, you would have done anything to stop it," I retorted sharply to my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. Then my former mother-in-law continued her nonsense. "So are you going to give me my grandchild or not? I want to be with my grandchild as soon as possible. You've had him for 3 years now, it's my turn." Stunned, I was interrupted by the arrival of my parents and my son Kieran, who appeared with concern, asking, "What's going on? Is there a problem?" It turned out they had been alerted by a regular customer and rushed to the shop. Then, as Kieran held hands with my parents, my former mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oh, how adorable. He looks just like my son did as a child. Look, I'm your grandma." She attempted to approach Kieran, but before I could intervene, Kieran firmly declared, "I only have one grandma," and clung tightly to my mother's side. Sensing tension, my mother calmly suggested to my former mother-in-law, "Under the circumstances, it might be best if you leave." Ignoring her, my ex-husband demanded, "Just hand over the kid." As he tried to forcefully snatch Kieran away from my parents, stepping in front of him to protect Kieran, I was easily brushed aside due to my smaller stature. "Kieran, be careful," with my ex-husband just inches away from grabbing him. A sudden movement caught us all by surprise. Looking up, I saw my father, who had executed a flawless over-the-shoulder throw. It turned out my father had been a police officer and had competed in national judo championships during his youth. My ex-husband, unaware of this background, was left speechless from the pain, staring at my father with a mix of astonishment and helplessness. "Well then, if you plan on causing any more trouble for my children or grandchild, we may have to involve the authorities." "What will it be?" my father asked firmly, displaying his police badge to my former mother-in-law. Caught off guard, she paled and hastily grabbed my ex-husband's hand before fleeing. Since that day, I've had no contact with either of them, nor do I care to know their whereabouts. A few years later, inspired by my father's bravery, Kieran expressed his desire to follow in his footsteps and become a police officer. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a cop too, and I'll protect you," he declared. Now he's dedicated to his studies with a focus on achieving his goal. Under my father's mentorship, Kieran practices judo and has gained recognition among his peers for his skill. As for me, I'll continue to support and watch over my beloved son as he grows.